Okay, I was a little bit late. So please, my apologies. Hope everyone is good. We're going to begin with our motivation as usual. So you know the prayer by heart, probably the first part, but Anna's going to put it up anyway. Sangye chunang suki chognam la Changchu bardu dagni kyapsu chi dagi chunen gipe sognam ki trola penche sangye drupa sho. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. Through the collections I create, through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit migrating beings. Sangye churang soke chognam la Changchu bardu dagni kyapsu chi dagi chunyen gipe sognam ki drola penche sangye truparsho. By offering this ground, anointed with perfume and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun and the moon, visualized as a Buddha realm, may all migrators enjoy a pure realm. O holy and perfect pure Lama, from the clouds of compassion that form the skies of your Dharmakaya wisdom, please release a rain of vast and profound Dharma precisely in accordance with the needs of those to be trained. Idam Guru Ranam Mandalakam Nirya Tayami. Okay. Having said, having hopefully tried to uh, take refuge and generate bodhicitta with effort, with words. Now we'll try to do a little bit more with through meditation. So as usual, sit comfortably with your spine erect. Watch your breathing. Relax your body, relax your mind. Place your mindfulness on the breathing, the respiration that you have become familiar with. It's the defining characteristic of mindfulness. Let go of all other conceptual thoughts. Once you've been a little bit successful in calming the mind from the conceptual thoughts, let go of your object of observation of the respiration itself and turn your attention to the mental consciousness. That you know via its contents. And once you recognize the contents, conceptual thoughts, memories, plans, observations about the present, gradually let go of them and focus on the substratum within which they are occurring, the clear light nature of the mind, here meaning the conventional clear light nature. Because this object that we're trying to observe is much more subtle than the breathing, which is easy to find and observe. You might notice that your respiration becomes even more subtle as you're not engaging as much in conceptual thought through the 72,000 or whatever number of nadis, channels within our body. This mental consciousness has the quality, conventional quality, of not obstructing the arisal or reabsorption of material that arises within it, conceptual thoughts, images, and so forth. It doesn't hinder them, doesn't hinder their coming or going. We can recognize from this that we can remind ourselves again and again, we can develop the qualities that we have not yet developed, good qualities that we might admire, or that we can come to admire once we understand the Dharma. Maybe at first we don't understand their benefits, the benefits of compassion or patience or whatever. We can get rid of our faults, our neediness, our self-cherishing, our ignorance. This quality of the mind is also called the conventional Buddha nature, or which is also synonymous with the developmental Buddha nature. The fact that we can develop these qualities and eliminate these faults, that's also development, isn't it? Elimination of the bad. The fact that we can recognize that now and rejoice in that, feel joy, is due to this auspicious moment of a life of leisure and endowment that we created with effort in previous lives, because it's causes our virtuous karma and prayer, generosity, and so forth, the other perfections, which are not naturally our orientation as ordinary sentient beings. So we can rejoice in that, in this moment, in the fact that this auspicious moment, the Buddha reminded us again and again in both the lesser vehicles, suttas, and the Mahayana sutras, had great purpose, great meaning, that we could develop, we could actualize liberation in this life, this very life. We could actualize enlightenment in this very life by putting effort. Why would we want to develop, actualize enlightenment more than liberation? Because it's through that state of enlightenment that we could actually benefit all our former mothers, our friends, even strangers and enemies who have helped us in various ways throughout numberless lives. We're now immersed within cyclic existence, many or most without a refuge protector. Although the Buddhas are present and want to help them, they don't recognize that help, those teachings, thinking to achieve that state of enlightenment for their benefit. I'm going to listen to the teachings today that elaborate on the creation of the two collections of merit and wisdom taught by the Buddha in his many sutras, especially the Prajnaparamita sutras, elaborated on by and clarified by Nagarjuna in his fundamental wisdom text, commented on by Chandrakirti in his Majjhimakavatara, and elucidated, illuminated by Lama Khapa in his Gompa Rapsel that we're reading and studying. I think I'm going to participate in the class today. I'm going to listen, contemplate, and meditate for the purpose of achieving enlightenment for the sake of all mother sentient beings. That's my end goal. Okay, bring your attention back, if you will, to present. And good to see you. And again, sorry, I was a little bit late. As I said, I was actually a little bit early downstairs, and I thought I would take a nap on the couch, set my watch alarm, but I must have needed that sleep. So I think it was like 12:05 that I sat down, and then I got telephone calls around 1 o'clock saying, "Where are you?" Sorry about that. I guess my body needed that. Okay, how are we doing? Anyone have any questions from previous classes or in general? No? Okay. And okay, let me try to get the right page here. So we are in the section talking about a new section now on the ultimate truth. There we go. Which is very, very interesting, I think. I think you'll find interesting. So in Jipa's text, oops. This is the second outline. It says ultimate truth. This says two parts, explaining the meaning of the lines of the root text and rejecting objections against this explanation. I think we talked about, we're up to that already. So the first outline, explaining the meaning of the root lines of the root text, explaining the meaning of the lines of the root text. So the text says, through the force of an eye disease, one perceives false things such as floating hairs and so on. Those with clear vision see what is actually so. Understand suchness to be like this as well. Okay, so this is a very famous, this is now stanza 629. For many weeks now, we've been elaborating on verse 628 from the Madhyamaka, which was talking about perception of conventional truth and so forth. It actually delved into ultimate truth a lot also, by the way. But now, because emptiness is not something that can be explained directly in words, as we will again understand. We've heard that many, many times before, that emptiness cannot be explained directly in words so that the words convey the actual experience of emptiness, nor can it be experienced directly with conceptual thought. Chandrakirti has this analogy, and I don't know if it is an analogy that is found in other texts, but this is one of the famous analogies about the someone who has a particular kind of eye disease. Jeffrey translated that verse as, where just those unreal entities such as falling hairs and so forth are imputed, or you could translate what he says imputed, are imagined through the force of cataracts. So Jeffrey used the word cataracts. Here, cataract is not the actual meaning of the Tibetan word rabrip, which is in Sanskrit. Paul, do you know what the Sanskrit is of rabrip? Timura, right?
Something like that. Not off the top of my head, though.
So it's not the meaning of cataract. We talked about this several times before, and I think I mentioned in the last class and in the discussion group on Monday. But anyway, let's say eye disease or defect. Nadine, when you recite the verse from the Vajrachetaka, how does that go? That has the analogies. Do you have it memorized?
You mean the verse in the end of the Vajrachetika?
Yes,
Like,
yes, right.
yes. I don't have it memorized, but I know which verse. I can also find it here.
So there's a verse there that we talked about before that talked about these various similes, like a defect of the eye. It's the same word, rabrip, in Tibetan. And different people translate it different ways. It shouldn't be cataract. What it means is this particular kind of disease that classmate Doris looked up the pronunciation of. Doris, can you pronounce the name of this disease?
Well, I thought you were, but it's myodysopsia.
Myodysopsia or myodysopsia. I think Doris said that was sometimes some people might pronounce it that way. So what this means is a particular kind of defect. When you're young and you don't have any defect of your eyes, things are very clear. But as you get older, some debris within the vitreous liquid within one's eye, it is sort of floating around by Brownian motion and by gravity starts to fall down, and one can see various, as though there were bees or falling hair. That's what's being referred to here. So reading Jeffrey's and changing the words a little, where just those unreal entities such as falling hairs and so forth are imagined through the force of an eye defect. What is seen by one with clear eyes is the suchness of those falling hairs, the actual reality of those falling hairs. Understand it similarly here. Okay, so in reading Jimpa's text says, here the commentary says, so Chandrakirti's own commentary, auto-commentary, the Bhashyam says, now I wish to present ultimate truth. I, Chandrakirti, wish to elaborate about ultimate truth. Because ultimate truth cannot be expressed by words, and that means directly by words, right? You can definitely talk about emptiness, and that's how we know emptiness, through words generally. Because it is not an object of cognition that follows from words, so the people who hear the words, their consciousness that hears those words can't, because it's not an object of cognition of those people that hear those words. That means it is not a directly experienced, when you hear the words, you don't actually experience what the person actually has experienced themselves until you've realized emptiness directly. Because of that, it cannot be presented directly. To help elucidate its nature, I will give those who wish to listen an analogy drawn from the ordinary person's experience. And that note 456 just mentions where in Chandrakirti's auto-commentary this comes from. So analogy, this is one of the famous analogies that Chandrakirti, what's one of the famous other analogies that we had near the beginning of the text? Does anyone remember any in particular that Chandrakirti sort of unique for? I always think of the bucket in the well, talking about compassion, as the bucket easily falls down when it has, heavy with water, and it's difficult to pull up again, as though, easy to go down to the lower realms, very difficult to go up to the upper realms, hitting the sides of the wall all the time, experiencing the sufferings of cyclic existence. That was one of the famous analogies. I don't know if I've ever seen anywhere else, any of the sutras before that. It might have been, but I think that was an analogy from a personal experience. And this is also Chandrakirti's analogy. Making sense so far? How are we doing? Okay. So the meaning of the statement, reading Jimpa's text again, the meaning of the statement that ultimate truth is not an object of cognition is indicated by the phrase, it cannot be presented directly. in Naxo's translation, so this many times Lama Tsongkhapa mentions Naxo Lotsowa, although Naxo Lotsowa's final view was not necessarily the same view that Lama Tsongkhapa is advocating. Naxo's translation sometimes is better than the traditional one that came to be used. What was it? Patsap's translation. So in Naxo's translation, this phrase appears to be, quote, cannot be shown in a direct demonstration. It's a little bit awkward. Jeffrey translates it this way. In this, or here, the meaning of ultimate truth not being an object of consciousness and verbalization is, as is said by Chandrakirti, that it, quote, cannot be taught directly. Ngusu Tempa. Moreover, Naxo's translation reads, cannot be manifestly taught. So what's the difference between directly and manifestly? Directly is more or less, it cannot be taught explicitly as opposed to implicitly. Manifestly has the sense that it can't be presented before you in a way that is, is that when we talk about something being manifest, that means that it is directly observable to your consciousness. So Lama Tsongkhapa says this seems to be a little bit better. Okay, so then as to the meaning of this point, Lama Tsongkhapa says, there is the following from the Prasanapada, the clear words are clearly worded, where Chandrakirti comments on Nagarjuna's statement that suchness cannot be known from others. Okay. Or as Jeffrey says, commenting on Nagarjuna's statement that the meaning of suchness is not something known from another. And he's, in Jeffrey's text, you can see in his notes in the bottom of that page being 255, he says that this is commenting on the stanza in chapter 18, stanza 9 in chapter 18 from the Majjhamaka, the Mula Majjhamaka Karikas. So that's fundamental wisdom. Okay. So the quote is, this is from Chandrakirti's commentary. When someone with myodesopia, or sopia, sees false realities such as floating hairs, even though the person who, free of the eye malady, may show him that there are no floating hairs, they indicate to them there's nothing there, the other person remains incapable of perceiving the fact as it is. That person is incapable of perceiving the absence of floating hairs in the way in which the person without myodesopia does. Okay. Making sense? What do you think, Mikhail?
I think it's okay, yeah.
Yeah, okay, yeah. So I remember when we were first studying this with Geshe Jumpa Gyatso at Institute of Lama Tsongkhapa, we translated the Majjhimavatara at that time. That was the main text, and the commentary we used as Gompa Rapsel. And at that point, most of the texts that were the translation of the Karikas, we were treading new ground at that time, translating the Basham, Chandrakirti's auto commentary. So most of the people translated Rabrip as cataracts. So cataract, if you have cataracts, you don't necessarily see falling hairs, right? That usually cataracts, as David can attest, who's recently had cataract surgery, usually prevents you from seeing things clearly. It's kind of like a covering. And so sometimes the term cataract is used, but not with this word, rabrip, by another word that actually means, when we talk about the cataract of ignorance, something that is preventing you from seeing reality. So if you're in the presence of someone who happens to have these floaters, as they're said, we've also used that word many times, experiencing them as though they're falling into their food in front of them, on the plate in front of them. If you see them being, agitated by this, and you try to say, look, there are no hairs there, they can hear your words. They can understand that. They might even understand that there are no hairs there through your words, but they don't understand. They can't get rid of that vision. They can't experience the direct elimination of those hairs. That's what's being talked about here. Okay. So continuing now this is Lama Tsongkhapa's commentary on that. So that was a statement from Chandrakirti's clear words, not from Chandrakirti's Majjhimaka Avatara Bhasham. Lama Tsongkhapa says, the person who has no myodysopia, Chandrakirti says, might point to the one who has it and say, there are no floating hairs here. But that does not mean the other person will then perceive the absence of floating hair in the same way as the person without myodysopia. They can have an understanding. Okay, there's no hairs here. This is, like when the doctor tells you, like if you have a phantom limb. Do you know what a phantom limb is? You might feel that if your arm has been amputated, your leg has been amputated, you might feel that there is an actual limb there. If someone tells you, if you just woken up and you think, oh, my leg is hurting, and someone tells you there is no leg there, sort of maybe a little bit similar. Okay. The person who has no myodysopia, Chandrakirti says, might point to the one who has it and say, there are no floating hairs here. But that does not mean the other person will then perceive the absence of floating hairs in the same way as the person without myodysopia. The point is that the listener does not perceive the absence of floating hairs the way the one without the eye malady, this floaters of myodysopia, the way that they do. This does not mean, however, that the other person does not understand the absence of floating hair whatsoever. They can understand, okay, yeah, there's no floating hair, but I'm still seeing it. Give me a break. Okay. So continuing, taking this as an analogy, when suchness is presented, so this is an analogy about emptiness. When suchness or emptiness is presented, Chandrakirti maintains, although the listener does not realize it in the way those who are free of ignorance taint perceive it, this does not mean that in general they do not realize suchness at all. Making sense? So when emptiness is explained, the words can't convey the way that a person who is free of ignorance and actually perceives emptiness directly, the words, even the words of a person who has realized emptiness directly, can't convey the way that that emptiness actually exists to the person who's listening. Yet the person who's listening still, they can understand something from that, like the person who has falling has these floaters, it perceives falling hairs, they can understand that there are no floating hairs there, even though they can't remove that appearance to themselves. Chandrakirti maintains, although the listener does not realize it in the way that those who are free of ignorance's taint perceive it, this does not mean that, in general, they do not realize suchness at all. Therefore, it is not the case at all that ultimate truth cannot be taught in the definitive scriptures about the profound truth. It is not at all the case that it cannot be expressed by the speech that reveals it, or that it cannot be realized by cognitions that arise from those statements, from such statements. This understanding should be applied in all contexts where suchness, where emptiness is characterized as not being the object of cognition and words. That's nice, right? That's a nice clarification. What do you think, Richard? Does that make sense? What's it saying? Can you re-express it in your own?
I think so. I think what it's saying is that even though the person who does not have even though a person may not be a Buddha, they can still have suchness, emptiness explained to them and understand it and have a realization. It's just not a direct realization. That's how I understand it.
Yeah, I think that's good. Yeah, that the many, many times that we hear that emptiness is inexpressible, cannot be conveyed by words, is unimaginable. That's talking about the direct realization of it, that it cannot be transmitted by words, and that conceptual thought cannot apprehend emptiness as it actually is. That is making sense. Conceptual thought cannot have a direct realization of emptiness.
Right, because there's hairs in the conceptual thought.
Yeah. Okay. So we're there. Everyone okay? Rachel, you okay? Okay. Is Ron here today? Ron's not here. Oh, Ron's there. Yeah. Okay. Then continuing. Through the force of the eyes being affected by an eye disease, Jeffrey had says, through the force of his or her eyes being affected by cataracts again. That's not the case. It's this robrip. It's this myodysopia or dysopia. Through the force of the eyes being affected by an eye disease, by floaters, someone afflicted with such a malady perceives false things, such as floating hairs in a dinner bowl or a plate made from rhinoceros horn, perhaps, he says. So you can interpret this different ways. Sometimes I think originally many years ago, what we were thinking what this meant was that you had a cup made from a rhinoceros horn so that there was a circle and it came to a point at the bottom, right? You could drink like the Vikings drinking from some horns or something like that. But I think what it actually means is that sometimes rhinoceros horn can be used to make the implication here in Jimpa's thing, a dinner bowl. Did Jeffrey say? Jeffrey says, through the force of his or her eyes being affected by cataracts, should be floaters. A person with floaters seeing falling hairs as well as bees and so on which are included within Chandrakirti's words and so forth, for them to see that within a vessel for food and drink, such as rhinoceros horn and so forth, which is in the hand. So Jimpa has the words and so on. The phrase and so on indicates things like flies. So when he's talking about this, when you have floaters, there can be the sense of falling hairs, or there can be the sense of little particles moving around by Brownian motion, or just through your eye contracting and your head moving and so forth, kind of like bees, or as Jimpa translates it, flies. Okay. To remove them, to attempt to remove them, the person who has myodysopia may try and shake the bowl again and again. Someone with clear vision, on seeing this, might approach that person who sees hair and so on, who might direct his attention there. Jeffrey translates that. Someone without cataracts, someone without floaters, whose eyes are clear, realizes this and approaches the person, whereupon, even though the person without cataracts, without myodysopia, aims his or her sight to that place where the person with cataracts sees the entities of those falling hairs and so forth, he or she does not observe those aspects of falling hairs. The person without floaters, clear-sighted person, and does not conceptualize anything having falling hairs as their substratum. This is coming in Jimpa's translation in the next sentence. That is to say, does not conceptualize any attributes of falling hairs. What could those attributes be? What do you think, Samvansh? What kind of attributes being talked about?
I mean, attributes of falling hairs. I don't know what to say, Venerable George. I see floaters. Things come and go, right? Attributes.
Right. So I was thinking it meant something like blue falling hairs. There are no blue falling hairs. There are no gray falling hairs. There are no white falling hairs. I was thinking that's what is meant here. Not exactly clear. But so the person with clear eyes comes there, clear sight, healthy eyes, young, with no floaters. They don't see the same thing, and they don't see the falling hairs or the bees or the flies falling into the food or into the plate that the person with floaters sees, and they don't see any attributes of that, that they're fast, that they're slow, that they're white, that they're blue, or whatever. That's my interpretation of that. So Lama Tsongkhapa's commentary continues, but not only will he not perceive hair and such, he will also have no conceptions of any properties predicated on such hair. This is catching up in Jimpa's translation. And when the person with myodysopia shares his thoughts, Hopkins at this point is being very progressive and saying his or her, like I often try to do. When the person with myodysopia shares his or her thoughts with the one who is free of the disease, saying, I see floating hairs, the one free of floaters, wanting to dispel the false thoughts of the one affected by the disease, may, for the benefit of the other, utter words to negate this, to calm them down, to say, there are no floating hairs. Come on. Nevertheless, In so saying, such a speaker is by no means denigrating the phenomena of floating hair. What does that mean? What do you think, Stephen? They're in no means denigrating the phenomena of floating hair.
Thanks, Venerable George. I think what that means is that they still recognize that the person afflicted with the eye disease has that appearance. That the floating hairs appear to the person with the disease.
Right. It's like dealing with those people that ordinary people would say have mental problems, hear voices or have schizophrenia or see things like that. You're not denigrating the fact that they don't hear it at all. There's something that's going on, that they have some kind of hallucination like this. So in terms of the analogy here, it's kind of talking about person who is the person without myodysopia in this example is what kind of person in terms of realizing emptiness? Shanka, what kind of person is this?
I would say an arhat, someone who has direct perception, direct realization of emptiness, right?
So only arhats have direct realization of emptiness. Hey.
Well, I mean, I guess not, because in arhat, the definition would be that they have they have emptiness conjoined with calm abiding, but I guess you could have, I don't know. I mean, I don't know is the answer. Get better.
Preach. Luis, can you clarify for Shanka? He's obviously needed a nap also. He should have.
Arhats are on the listener and pratyeka Buddha path. Anyone who's perceived emptiness directly could be an Arya, someone on the Mahayana path.
Right. It doesn't have to be an arhat. Anyone who's realized emptiness directly.
Yes,
but are they necessarily the ones that are being talked about here? The ones that don't have any myodysopia? This is actually talking about a Buddha who is not only the three individuals, the two kinds of arhats, the Shravaka, Pratika Buddha arhats, or the Bodhisattvas on the pure levels, because here it's talking about a Buddha who doesn't have, who is trying to explain to this person. Well, let's go a little bit further and see. And when the person with myodysopia shares his thoughts with the one who is free of disease, saying, "I see floating hairs," the one free of myodysopia, wanting to dispel the false thoughts of the one affected by the disease, may, for the benefit of the other, utter words to negate this, saying there are no floating hairs. Nevertheless, in saying so, such a speaker is by no means denigrating the phenomena of floating hairs. In fact, it is only the one who is free of myodysopia, not the one with the disease, who sees what is actually so, pertaining to the supposed falling hairs seen by the one with myodysopia. Very wordy, right? And as with these two examples, and so Jimpa has in brackets, of one afflicted myodysopia and the other not, understand suchness to be like this as well, which is the referent of the analogy. How are we doing? Making some sense? Okay, Rachel, what do you think?
Happy New Year, Venerable George. I'm now confused whether we're talking about anyone who has directly perceived emptiness, or whether we're only talking about Buddhas, and that the eye disease is not just the direct realization of interfering with understanding the true nature of reality, the emptiness of inherent existence.
Yeah. So let's see. This is an analogy, the example of eyes with the eye disease, floaters, and so forth, indicating that the person who has not realized emptiness directly, well, let's say even the arhats, the two kinds of arhats and the bodhisattvas on the pure grounds, we refer to them earlier in the text as the three types of individuals. So if you were just to throw that into debate, who are the three types of individuals? There could be many contexts where three types of individuals are mentioned in the scriptures, right? You'd have to know what the person was thinking to know, to debate with them. The appearance of floating hairs is referring to what? What is that analogous to, Louise?
Conventional reality, not seeing things as inherently existence.
Maybe that's, would you agree with that? Paul, what do you think? Would you agree with that?
No, I think it's analogous to inherent existence, or the existence of a self, of persons or phenomena, something that doesn't really.
That's what Louise.
Oh, sorry.
Fine-tuned her response at the end. Yeah. So this is referring to the appearance of inherent existence. How about the arhats that, or these three individuals? Do in post meditation, do they appear as inherently existent? Sean says emphatically yes.
Yeah, I thought we discussed this last week, didn't we?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And even to the three individuals, things appear. So the analogy is, so the Hinayana, the three individuals within meditative equipoise, or any of the aryas within meditative equipoise, don't see inherent existence, don't perceive inherent existence, right? Yet in that meditative equipoise, can they explain to the person? Who can explain to the person that there are no hairs there when they're in meditative equipoise on emptiness?
Only a Buddha. Right? Oh, sorry.
Buddha, yeah.
No, good. But Mikhail?
Yeah, a Buddha, yeah. Only a
Yeah.
Buddha is permanently in meditative equipoise.
So the Buddha is in meditative equipoise, but also perceives the conventional reality and can explain, like in the Heart Sutra, and many other sutras, the Buddha is always in meditative equipoise, perceiving the ultimate nature of phenomena, yet perceiving the conventional reality at the same time, and can express through words that there are no floating hairs there, that there is no inherent existence there. Does that help? I think I can't remember who asked. Are we talking about? Oh, Rachel. Yeah. Does that make sense, Rachel?
So,
Okay.
sorry, our
Yeah.
text here, when speaking about the person who has no myodesopsia, it's talking about Buddhas, yeah? Only Buddhas.
Well, in this analogy, when it's talking about they come there and explain to the person there are no floating hairs there, you could say that this is an Arya, a being who's realized that, but even then, even the three individuals like the Arhats and so forth, and the Bodhisattvas on the pure grounds. I forgot to bring up my cough drops. I bought some nice licorice pastilles. How do you say that? Little candies. Okay, I don't know how it's pronounced.
We say pastille.
Pastille, yeah. I bought some pastilles the other day, but I forgot to bring them up. Excuse me. So the Aryas and so forth, they could say that there's no inherent existence there, but they themselves are still perceiving inherent existence, right? They're still perceiving the falling hairs. So it's only the Buddha who, through in the analogy, comes there and who doesn't see the falling hairs, right? Doesn't see the inherent existence there while experiencing the conventional reality. I think that's the example. Okay, how are we doing? Making sense? Okay. Nadine, did you find that stanza, or did you give up when I?
Yes, I found it.
And can you read it to us? What does that say in the Vajrachatika?
As a star, a visual aberration, a lamp, an illusion, dew, a bubble, a dream, lightning, and a cloud, view all compounded like that.
What was the first two? The first two?
A star, a visual aberration.
Okay, so in that particular translation, Rob Ripp is translated as visual aberration. Sometimes earlier was translated as cataract, which is probably completely wrong. Sometimes could be translated as floaters, a star, floaters, or a star, Maya dystopia, and so forth. So that's what you have to understand when you recite that verse from the Vajrachatika. That verse is often is recited whenever the monastics, the monks and nuns, have their bi-monthly confession, sojong, and it's at that point when reciting that verse, one snaps one's fingers to recognize the, all of those similes, but particularly impermanence and so forth. Okay, let's continue. Then in Jimpa's translation of Lama Tsongkhapa, it says, understand this as follows. And why did Jimpa have a note there, 458? The following paragraph is a gloss of a relevant section of Chandrakirti's commentary. That's more or less the case of all of Lama Tsongkhapa, is glossing, Chandrakirti's commentary. Except when Lama Tsongkhapa goes on extensive, elaboration about something. So understand this as follows. The reality of the aggregates, the elements, sense bases, and so on, perceived by those who do not see suchness and whose mind is tainted or adversely affected by the eye malady of ignorance, is the conventional nature of the aggregates and so on, analogous to the perception of floating hairs by someone with myodysopia. My grammar is not that good, but that seems like, when I say the reality of the aggregates, elements, and sense spaces and so on, perceived by those, that's plural, right, who do not see suchness, and those whose mind, wouldn't it be better to say those whose minds are tainted? Yeah, okay. Those minds who are tainted or adversely affected by the eye malady of ignorance, the reality of the aggregates is the conventional nature of the aggregates and so on, analogous to the perception of floating hairs by someone with myodysopia. So for someone with ignorance, the appearance of inherent existence of the aggregates and so forth is the way they actually are. So when it says the reality of the aggregates, elements, and sense bases, what are those three things? Michael?
The 18 constituents? or 12 sources?
So this combination of three things, aggregates, elements, and here he says sense bases. Where is that in Jeffrey's text? I don't have exactly. Let's see.
257.
257.
He says aggregates, constituents, sense spheres.
Sense spheres. Okay. So in general, what we talk about, you know, a person is imputed upon the five aggregates, right? Generally speaking. A person can, so the five aggregates, within the five aggregates, you can find all, can you find all phenomena within the five aggregates, Shanka?
This is a trick. There is, I know
So,
this is a trick question, but I can't remember what it is.
did the five aggregates, Richard, did the five aggregates?
Maybe all
Come on,
compound.
your time, the buzzer buzzed.
Factors, perhaps?
Pardon?
Compositional factors?
Compositional factors are impermanent. Yeah, they're included in the five aggregates. Are all phenomena included in the five aggregates? Oh, these are things we should know.
Yeah, I think so.
Oh, Don, what do you think? Are all phenomena included in the five aggregates?
I think yes.
Oh, Rachel. Rachel looks like she
it
just
doesn't make sense unless everything is a person. I'm getting a little confused. I mean, we're talking about like a periodic table, right? And I'm like imagining all the elements are in a person, and that's not true. So it's just that.
Hold on. The five aggregates are not the person. Five aggregates, you know, the word skanda, the way the Tibetans translate it as pungbo, means pile. That's kind of their take on skanda. So the five skandhas, they're five groups of things. What? Forms, material things, feelings, discriminations, compositional factors, and primary consciousness. Those five piles or heaps, sometimes translate heaps, include all impermanent phenomena. All impermanent phenomena can be found within the five aggregates. But because phenomena are not exhausted by impermanent phenomena, there are other things, there are permanent phenomena. So not all phenomena can be found in the five aggregates. But they're sufficient. So the Buddha, you say, why did the Buddha even bring up the five aggregates then? What's he doing? Bothering us with this other category? Because the person who is impermanent, a person is impermanent, a being is impermanent, they can be found, you know, all of that, what constitutes the person can be found in one of the five aggregates. They can be imputed upon their five aggregates. So when you elaborate more thoroughly and you want to have a category that covers all phenomena, you can talk about, as Mikhail said, the 18 constituents or the 18 kam. What is that in Sanskrit, Paul?
Ayatana.
No, the 18.
Oh, no, Dhatu, sorry.
Dhatus, right? And the 12 entrances, which is what Paul was anticipating, the ayatanas or the Tibetan keche. So those categories include all phenomena. So the 18 constituents that are being translated here, or the 18 dhatus, like the same dhatus that we've been talking about, like when we talk about there's different words that have the word dhatu in them. They include the objects of the six senses, of the six consciousnesses, let's say. So objects of eye consciousness, ear consciousness, nose consciousness, taste consciousness, body consciousness, and mental consciousness, the objects of those, the sense bases of those consciousnesses that perceive those objects, and the consciousnesses themselves. Or we could start from there. The six consciousnesses, the sense bases that allow those consciousnesses to observe those objects, and the objects themselves. So as there are six kinds of consciousness, and they each have these three categories, there are 18 dhatus. And if you leave off, so in the 12 entrances, Paul, which of those 18 are left off to get 12?
You were leaving off the objects.
Huh? Is that right? There are entrances to what?
Entrances to there's the entrances to the sense faculties, right?
There are the entrances to the generation of consciousness.
And so long since I've studied Abhidharma.
Okay, what do you know? What are the 12 entrances?
I remember, I think that the 12 sources is merging the sense bases and mind. So you have the six objects and the six
consciousnesses,
senses, which groups the sense base and the mind. That's what I had in mind. But...
Who has Stephen, do you know 12 entrances?
Yeah, I'm going with Mikhail's explanation.
Okay,
It's the senses. I think it's the sense bases and sense organs. Well, no, those are the same. So it's the organs and the sense consciousnesses.
So they are entrances to what then? Rachel, have you looked them up? Oh, okay.
But if they're generating consciousness, then it must be something besides consciousness. So it would be the objects and the sense spaces.
Yeah, okay. So I'll leave that for you to research. These are things that should be on the tips of your tongues. So that's what's being referred here to. So when it's talking about the reality of the aggregates, the elements, which are the dhatus, the 18 dhatus, or the 18 constituents, and the sense bases, that's just talking about the reality of the aggregates, elements, and sense bases. How does Jeffrey translate this here? Remind me, someone saw it there before. I don't have this.
257, second paragraph.
Second paragraph. Therefore, the suchness of the falling hairs that are seen, we want to...
Second full paragraph, sorry. With respect to how this is to be understood, the entities of the aggregates, constituents, sense spheres.
And spheres and so forth, observed by those who do not see suchness because their minds are damaged, that is, polluted by the cataracts of ignorance, are the conventional entities of those aggregates and so forth, like the hairs observed by those with cataracts or by one who has floaters and so forth. So in this enumeration, he has aggregates, constituents, and sense spheres. So that is not talking about the usual three categories of the aggregates, the 18 dhatus, and the 12 ayatanas. It's talking about the aggregates, the constituents. It would have to be the six sense spheres, right? Anna, what do you think? You're going to say that we should have a little break, right? Okay. So yeah, this is a good point. So before we do, how are we doing? Making sense? Anyone perplexed? Stephen, you have a perplexed mudra there.
Oh yeah, I do. I'm just trying to catch up with the aggregates, constituents, and sense spheres versus the standard definition that we were going through. So I'm
Right.
a little bit confused about that.
So generally speaking, and I don't have, maybe Paul, do you have the point in the text here? Does he actually have Jeffrey is also saying sense spheres. Jimpa is saying sense bases.
The Tibetan is Pungpo Tang Kam Tang Yeche.
Yeah, so they're both wrong. It should be the ayatanas. So he's saying sense spheres. That's not a way that the keche is the ayatanas. That means the entrances that we were just talking about, the 12. Can't remember ever seeing that translated as sense spheres or as sense bases. Sense bases generally means the faculties. So it is the standard configuration, Stephen, even though they're translating sense bases or sense spheres. It's talking about the skandhas, the dhatus, and the ayatanas. So that covers all phenomena. Aggregates include all impermanent phenomena. The 18 dhatus include all phenomena, including permanent and impermanent, and the entrances also include all phenomena. So those two are more inclusive. The aggregates are exclusively impermanent phenomena. So the reality of the aggregates, elements, and entrances and so on, perceived by those who do not see suchness, and those whose minds are tainted or adversely affected by the eye melody of ignorance, are the conventional nature of the aggregates and so on, analogous to the perception of floating hairs by someone with myodysopia. Okay, let's take a little break.
Okay, thank you.
Time for tea and to relieve yourself. We'll be back. I'll keep my microphone on. Coming back. Okay, had a little break. So during the break, we clarified through the help of Shanka that the 12 entrances include the 6 objects and the 6 faculties and leave off the 6 consciousnesses. So the sense of the word keche or ayatana is that they are entryways or doorways for the generation of consciousness. That's one way you can remember. So if someone asks you what the 12 entrances are, they're entrances to consciousness. So consciousness is left off. So you're left with the 6 objects and the 6 faculties. Okay. KT, how are you doing? Making sense? Any questions so far, KT?
Oh, yes, thanks. It's making sense. With the word constituents and elements, when we first read it, I was thinking of the elements of actually like earth, water, fire, space,
Right.
wind. Is that included in this discussion? I know Nagarjuna goes to that famous passage sometimes. We hear that quoted about the person is not the earth, the water, the fire, the space,
Right.
and so on.
Right.
Is that a
So
part of this?
I think that, no,
Okay.
I think this is just it would probably, because I'm not sure how Jimpa translated the 4 elements before, if he used a different word for elements, but because that's generally what we use in the English language for the 4 or the 5 or the 6. That's probably not a good word here. So in one sense, maybe just to use the Sanskrit is useful. So the skandhas, the dhatus, and the ayatanas, or in other words, the aggregates, the constituents, if you want, or what's another good way of translating dhatus? I don't know. And the entrances. So those are the three categories that are often mentioned when the Buddha talks about including all phenomena. So the aggregates don't include all phenomena, they only include the impermanent phenomena. Okay.
Venerable?
Yes.
Sorry, skandhas, dhatus, and ayutanas. Those are the three, right?
Yes. Is that a good? So you've corrected my pronunciation. So how's the third one translated? Or the entrances translated? You say ayutanas?
No, ayatana. Ayatana.
Ayutana? Well, okay.
It's they're all the vowels are a. Ayatana.
Ayatana. Okay, not ayutana. Ayatana. Thank you, Paul. And Shanka for bringing that up. So Shanka, did that cover your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so understand this. So just reviewing. Understand this is as follows. The reality of the aggregates, elements, and sense bases, or the skandhas, the dhatus, and the ayatanas, and so on, the reality or the truth of those perceived by those who do not see suchness and those whose minds are tainted or adversely affected by the eye malady of ignorance is the conventional nature of the aggregates and so on. So for them, that's the reality, analogous to the perception of floating hairs by someone with myodysopia. Okay. Nadine, you with us? Yeah, okay. That very reality of the aggregates and so on, this is talking about the conventional reality, I think. The very reality of the aggregates and so on that are perceived by those who do not see their suchness, by those who do not see their suchness. What is there referring to here? Karen?
Well, I would think that that's referring to the person who does not realize emptiness, so they can't see their own suchness, like a Buddha could.
I think it's referring to the aggregates and so on, right? The very reality of the aggregates and so on that are perceived by those who do not see their suchness, the suchness of the aggregates and so on, is in fact perceived by the Buddhas. The very reality of the aggregates and so on. So how does Jeffrey translate that? Perceive, do not see their suchness. That object which is observed, no, what is it now? Respect to the entities of the, usually I have a correspondence between Jeffrey's and Chimpa's, but I've left off in this section.
I think that was it, George. I think he begins that object.
That object, which is observed by not seeing those very aggregates and so forth, in which the Buddhas, being free from the predispositions of ignorance, which are the obstructions to omniscience, perceive as the aggregates, as the nature of the aggregates and so forth, in the very way the eyes of one without cataracts do not see falling hairs, is the ultimate truth of those Buddhas. Wow. Long sentence. Does that make sense, David?
I believe so. Don't ask me to explain it, but I believe it makes sense. No, so
no, go ahead.
And I'm again probably way off base here on this. I have after my cataract surgery, I have a floater that comes in from the left.
Oh, okay.
And I can chase it off this. I can chase it off the screen from the left too if I try to follow it with my eye.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
And it seems like a bee or a fly. And so initially I would kind of
right,
do that kind of thing.
right.
So
You know, you can empathize with this person who sees the
I don't
falling
know.
trees
Yeah,
and
but
stuff like-
it's
Yeah.
not hairs in my soup. It's
Right.
something that's gonna get me.
Right.
So if I could perceive suchness during meditative equipoise, I would know that that's not a bee. But then if I got back up, and these are maybe those attributes that are attributed, or those things that are attributed to the falling hairs, when someone would get up from equipoise, they would swat at a fly.
So in the meditative equipoise, we're talking about a non-Buddha, let's say an Arya at first, an Arya in meditative equipoise, would they perceive the floaters?
No.
Why
But
not?
when they got up
Why
from
not?
equipoise,
Why not?
because they know it's empty, they would know that it doesn't exist while they're sitting.
Even more fundamental reason. Richard, why in meditative equipoise on emptiness of an Arya being, what happens to the sense perceptions? Are they functioning?
I don't know. That's a good question.
Paul, what do you think?
No, they're not functioning.
Why not?
Because all you're perceiving is emptiness directly.
You're only perceiving the mental so generally speaking, the mental consciousness perceives what the sense consciousnesses are perceiving through the analogy that I myself gave of the person in the basement of the building looking at all of the screens of the security cameras, right? Where there's a security camera of the eyes, of the ears, the nose, the taste, and the body. So that's the mental consciousness that is perceiving those. But here, the mental consciousness is solely concentrated on emptiness. Is completely oblivious of those other screens, so to speak. So first of all, whether they were functioning at all, whether the eye consciousness, the ear consciousness, and so forth were functioning, the mental consciousness at this time is not paying any attention to them. But from the tantric point of view, well, let's say from the sutra point of view, when you have this meditative equipoise, a union of calm abiding and penetrative insight, which is single-pointedly meditating on emptiness, what happens to the sense consciousnesses at that time? They retreat away from the sense faculties. They may not absorb into the central channel or to the heart chakra, but they definitely recede away. They what's the word? Is that the right word? Recede. They move away from the sense bases, so they're not functioning at that time. The eye consciousness, let's say, in order for the eye consciousness to see something, what has to be present? There has to be an object and there has to be a sense space. So if it's moved away from the sense space, retreated, like at the time of deep meditation, when you're the consciousnesses, the gross consciousnesses recede back away from the sense bases. So there's no sight. So in that meditative equipoise on emptiness, David, you wouldn't be seeing the floaters. So this should give you energy to develop that meditative equipoise, and you can get rid of that worry of those floaters bothering you. Okay, this is encouragement. Okay. Okay, so is this making sense? This last paragraph, Jimpa translates that very reality, that reality itself of the aggregates and so on, that is perceived by those who do not see their suchness, do not see the suchness of those aggregates and so forth. So there's having two words here, reality and suchness. Isn't suchness reality? At the beginning of the sentence in Jimpa's text, when it says that very reality of the aggregates and so on, what reality is that talking about? Karen, what do you think?
Well, I think it's just our conventional reality that we aren't experiencing suchness, like in the first sentence of that paragraph.
Right. So what the people that have not realized emptiness, those individuals that have not realized emptiness, what they consider to be reality is what appears to them, right? So that reality itself, that what they consider to be real, the aggregates and so on, that are perceived by those who do not see the suchness of the aggregates and so on, is in fact perceived by the Buddhas. The Buddhas themselves do perceive conventional reality. This is going to be coming up in the next section here in more detail. Very, very important point to know. Although the Buddha's mind is single-pointedly concentrated on emptiness all the time, still one part of the Buddha's mind knows conventional reality. So we talked about this earlier. We talked about from the perspective of the Buddhist consciousness that is realizing emptiness or realizing suchness, no conventionalities appear, only emptiness. From the viewpoint or the perspective of the Buddha's omniscient mind that is perceiving the what is it, Jitawa? What do we translate it as Jitawa, Paul? The varieties, right?
Varieties.
The phenomena. That means the conventional phenomena. From the perspective of the Buddhist mind, perceiving conventional phenomena or the varieties of phenomena. Why is that? Because emptiness doesn't have any varieties, right? I mean, you can say there's the emptiness of the cup, the emptiness of the rhinoceros plate, the emptiness of my mug, and the emptiness of your nose. But emptiness itself is just of one taste, right? It's just the absence of inherent existence. So it doesn't have any variety in terms of its perception. But when you talk about other things like my drapes and the trees outside, the snow on the ground and everything, those are called the varieties. From the perspective of the Buddhist mind perceiving the varieties of phenomena, conventional phenomena, emptiness does not appear. Okay, so here, how do we say here? That very reality of the aggregates and so on that are perceived by those who do not see the suchness of the aggregates and so forth is in fact perceived by the Buddhas, who are free of the obscuration to knowledge in the form of habitual propensities toward ignorance, in a manner similar to those whose vision is unaffected by eye malady. Okay, so the person who is unaffected by the eye malady doesn't see the falling hairs at all. So they can't refer to the Aryas or the Arhats in meditative equipoise, because of course they don't perceive that reality in meditative equipoise. They don't see the conventional phenomena in meditative equipoise, but they can't be explaining to the person who sees the falling hairs that sees inherent existence. They can't explain to them that there's no inherent existence there. So this is referring to the Buddhas. And thus do not perceive floating hairs and so on. And this nature of the aggregates and so on is the ultimate truth for the Buddhas. Who has any problem with that? Louise, are you familiar with New York street lingo? You got a problem with that? My cousin, who's in New York, whenever we have some discussion, you got a problem with that? Let's see. How did Jeffrey translate that? So a little bit different translation. Oh, sorry, Louise, did you want to say something?
Yeah.
You got a problem with it.
Yeah, I got a little problem
Okay.
because Buddhists, their part of the mind is always focused on ultimate reality all the time, one pointedly. Now, to perceive conventional phenomenon, isn't that tainted by ignorance? I mean, what conventional phenomenon? What the varieties of conventional? How?
Oh, yeah.
How?
Right. Trees, fences, your car, the snow, my mug, the rhinoceros plate. All of these are varieties of phenomena. How did the Buddhists perceive them? Because they perceive everything directly. They don't have any implicit realizations. Everything is explicit or direct to them. How do they perceive that? They perceive it through knowing the minds of sentient beings. Because to the Buddhas, the conventional phenomena do not appear to them the way that phenomena appear to ordinary people. The way the phenomena appear to us is due to the imprints in our minds of ignorance and of the obstructions to omniscience. They appear to be inherently existent, and the varieties depend upon the karma, our individual karma. The Buddha has purified all that, so phenomena, when the Buddha if the Buddha were sitting here in my room, the Buddha would not perceive directly. It's hard to say because all of the sense, if the Buddha were embodied, let's say in Nirmanakaya, and you were to say, Buddha, look at my iPad here, and the Buddha took the aspect of looking at my iPad, it's the Buddha's eye consciousness. Every pore of the Buddha is omniscient. So the eye consciousness is omniscient, unlike ordinary consciousnesses, where there's a differentiation between sense power and mental consciousness and everything. So now I've lost what I was thinking.
So through your mind, the Buddha would perceive your iPad.
Yeah. So the Buddha, it doesn't appear, the conventional reality does not appear the way that it appears to us through the force of the imprints on the mind, the obstructions to omniscience. The Buddha is free of that. So there's never directly to the Buddha's mind, phenomena do not appear from them from themselves, but the Buddha knows them by knowing the minds of sentient beings who perceive them in these various ways. The Buddha knows how pretas perceive a pool of water as filthy and with hairs and excrement and so forth. The Buddha knows how the humans perceive it as water, and so forth, through knowing the minds of the sentient beings. Shankar, what do you think?
I've got two problems with that. No, I'm
got a problem with that.
Yeah, well, the first one, maybe a simpler one, is somehow I am not able to parse this sentence well enough to understand when he says this nature with the this in italics, what is that referring to? What is this referring to here?
Okay, so near the end, in Jimbo's translation, near the end, after the final comma, it says, and this nature of the aggregates and so on is the ultimate truth for the Buddhas.
Is that the suchness? Is that what he's talking about?
Yeah. So that's talking about how the Buddhas perceive. So it says, in a manner similar to those whose vision is unaffected by the eye malady and thus do not perceive floating hairs and so on. And this is the nature of the aggregate, and this nature of the aggregates and so on,
Okay.
which is not polluted by any ignorance, and is not polluted by the imprints of the, let's say, the obstructions to omniscience. This is the ultimate truth for the Buddhas.
Okay. Thank you.
Let's
oh, sorry.
Okay, no, go on, go ahead.
Second question I had was about what you just mentioned about the Buddhas and how they perceive conventional reality and so on. Earlier, when we were talking about, you said something about paraphrasing here, that one portion of their minds, although they're always in meditative equipoise, one portion of their minds can see conventional reality. But that's not, I mean, did I misunderstand? Because that's not my understanding, right? Because you again, then later you said they don't see conventional reality. They can see how others perceive.
Yes, that's the portion of the mind that's perceiving the varieties. How is that portion of the mind perceiving the variety of phenomena, the conventional phenomena? Through knowing the minds of sentient beings.
Okay, that's what I didn't. Okay, got it.
Not
Thank you.
through the force of the water appearing to be filthy or clean or as an abode or whatever way, or as ambrosia that the devas perceive. By knowing the minds of the devas, the Buddha's omniscient mind that's perceiving the varieties knows that it is perceived as ambrosia, not through the force of that water appearing directly to the Buddha as ambrosia or as nectar or amrita. Actually, I think I mentioned this before. The word that sometimes is translated as, well, let's say the Tibetan word dutsi. Paul, what is the Sanskrit for dutsi?
Amrita.
Amrita. What does that mean? What is the etymology of amrita?
It's deathless. Amrit, away from death or not dying.
Right. That which is non-dying. So that's referring, that's the word dutsi that we often translate as what? Nectar, ambrosia.
Elixir, yeah.
Yeah, elixir or something like this. So what it is that which brings about immortality. So amrita is the M with the R afterwards is the R with a dot underneath this. It's a vowel R, right? When you talk about the vowels, e, u, ri, those are the among the what, 16 vowels?
16 vowels, yeah.
There are two that are like R, and there are two that are like like L, right? So amrita, mrita means death, and amrita means without death. So the initial syllable that we mentioned many times is a negative particle in Sanskrit. Oftentimes can be understood that way. Okay. So let me read just finally before we go on to the next session how Jeffrey translated that. That object, because this is a long sentence, and I think he's changed the order of the sequence of the words, so maybe it makes a little more sense the way that Jeffrey says it. That object, which is observed by not seeing those very aggregates and so forth. So it's talking about an object that means something that exists, which is observed by not seeing those very aggregates. What does that mean, Nadine, by not seeing those aggregates?
And meditative equipoise?
Well, it's going to be talking about the Buddha's perception. The Buddha's always in meditative equipoise, but so the aspect of the Buddha's mind that's perceiving emptiness that object which it perceives is not which is observed by not seeing those very aggregates. So to that omniscient mind that's observing the ultimate, there are no conventional phenomena appearing to it. That object, that means emptiness, which is observed by those, observed by not seeing those very aggregates and so forth, and which the Buddhas, being free from the predispositions of ignorance. So what would that predispositions, or Jimpa translates habitual propensities toward ignorance? This is talking about one part of the obstructions to omniscience that causes phenomena to appear inherently. That object which is observed by not seeing those very aggregates and so forth, which the Buddhas, being free of the predispositions of ignorance, the obstructions to omniscience, perceive as the nature of the aggregates. So if we jump in the sentence, that object which the Buddhas perceive as the nature of the aggregates and so forth, in the way that the eyes of one without cataracts do not see falling hairs, is the ultimate truth of those Buddhas. Yeah, okay. Yeah, Stephen, wow, yeah, that's like a little bit long sentence.
Well, it's the sense of Jinpa's translation seems to me to be quite different.
Right. That's
because it sounds like when he begins his sentence, it sounds like he's talking about conventional reality.
When Jinpa begins, the very reality of the aggregates and so on that are perceived by those who do not see their suchness,
yes,
is in fact perceived by the Buddhas, who are free of the obstruction to knowledge in the form of habitual propensities toward ignorance, in a manner similar to those whose vision is unaffected by eye malady and thus do not perceive. Yeah, okay. Sounds like he's talking about that. Whereas Jeffrey starts out, that object which is observed by not seeing those aggregates and so forth. So this is talking about emptiness rather than the conventional, in which the Buddhas, being free of the predispositions of ignorance, which is to say the obstructions to omniscience, perceive as the nature of the aggregates and so forth, in the way that so that's talking about the ultimate nature of the aggregates and so forth, in the way that the eyes of one without cataracts do not see falling hairs, is the ultimate truth of those Buddhas. Yeah, very enigmatic. So I leave that for discussion group on Monday for you to see if you can equilibrate those. Paul, what do you think? Do you see some solution right off the bat? Do you see what Stephen was talking about?
Oh, I see what he's talking about. I think it's just, I mean, they're kind of saying the same thing. It's just, I think that, well, I'll have to look at the Tibetan. Either Jimbo or Jeffrey has, rearranged things to to emphasize different parts of the sentence.
Right. Okay. So we'll talk about that on Monday. So let's go on to the next section. Now, rejecting objections against this explanation. So what explanation is that? This is just this explanation that was just given about this verse 629, through the force of an eye disease, through the force of floaters or myodysopia, one perceives false things such as floating hairs and so on, including bees and flies that David is trying to swat away. Those with clear vision see what is actually so, understand suchness to be like this as well. So that's the proposition. And so that's how one is to understand through this analogy, how to understand how the Buddhas understand, those with clear vision. So rejecting objections against this explanation. Question: just as the eyes unaffected by myodysopia so that's someone clear-sighted, do not see even the appearance of floating hairs, if the Buddhas do not perceive conventional realities, such as the aggregates and so on, which appear to a mind adversely affected by ignorance, wouldn't those things then become non-existent? Wouldn't they be non-existent if they're not perceived by the Buddha's mind? For if they do exist, the Buddhas would necessarily perceive them, would necessarily see them. You say see, mean perceive, right? Does that question make sense? Sean thinks so. Yeah, okay. So Jimpa continues in his translation. He says, furthermore, if conventional realities such as the aggregates and so on do not exist, if conventionalities did not exist, there would then be no attainment of Buddhahood as well, because the being who first generated the awakening mind had to be someone who was affected by ignorance. That last phrase to me also takes a little bit of thought. Has anyone already grokked this, gone through this? Richard, have you read ahead already here?
I haven't read ahead, I'm sorry.
Okay, no, that's okay. Sometimes you do, so I'm always happy about that. So let's see if we can unpack this. So there's two parts of this qualm, this question. So if someone whose eyes are unaffected by the floaters don't see floating hairs, like that, if the Buddhas do not perceive conventional realities like the aggregates, which ordinary people that have ignorance perceive, wouldn't these things become non-existent? Because if they did exist, the Buddhas would have to perceive them. That's the thing. It's implying that the Buddhas don't perceive them at all. But we've already known from other cases that the Buddha has these two aspects of the mind. In the perspective of one that perceives emptiness, they don't exist at all. But there still has a part of the mind that perceives the variety of phenomena. So that's what's going to be elaborated here. Furthermore, if conventional realities like aggregates and so on do not exist, there would then be no attainment of Buddhahood either, because the being who first generated the awakening mind had to be someone who was affected by ignorance. That's the part that vexes me, that last phrase. Jeffrey translates that second part. If something exists, it must be preserved by the Buddha. If conventionalities such as aggregates do not exist, if you said they didn't appear to the Buddha, like the person who without Maya dysopia, floating hairs don't appear, like that analogy. If conventionalities such as the aggregates do not exist, then even the attainment of Buddhahood would not exist. Well, you could say it in many ways, because the attainment of Buddhahood is a conventional phenomena, right? That would not exist. But the reason given, because a person who initially generates a mind of altruistic aspiration to Buddhahood, who initially generates the mind, we say mind generation, is one who is polluted by ignorance. What do you think, Mikhail? What is that saying?
I would say that in order to, in the first place, generate bodhicitta, you have to understand conventional reality. You have to understand that I am suffering and others are suffering at the same time. So that's implied conventional understanding of reality.
Good understanding. I think that might be a good answer. So let's see the reply. So or answer in Jeffrey's text. Jimpa's text says reply. So Jimpa's text says, and I'm continuing because I think we missed maybe 5 or 8 minutes at the beginning because I'd overslept. Something like that. So with your permission, I'm going to go just a little bit longer. So reply, let me explain. Or as Jeffrey says, let us explain. So let me explain how this fault does not follow. Or as Jeffrey says, let us explain how this fallacy does not occur. The fallacy that the Buddhas don't perceive the conventionalities and so forth. These two things. To begin with, there are two modes by which a Buddha's gnosis, or pristine wisdom, is how Jeffrey translates yeshe. So that's, or jnana, right? As opposed to sherab or prajna. Prajna is the regular kind of wisdom. And when we talk about the wisdom that is conducive to the attainment of the states, the progression along the paths and the grounds and paths, that's usually referred to as yeshe. So there are two modes by which a Buddha's gnosis, Buddha's pristine wisdom, perceives objects of knowledge. There are two ways. The way in which all that is knowable within the sphere of ultimate truth is known. So that's through the perspective of the Buddha's mind that's perceiving the ultimate. There are two ways that the Buddha's pristine wisdom perceives objects of knowledge. So what objects of knowledge is that that aspect of the Buddha's mind perceiving? What object of knowledge? When I say object of knowledge, it's just one thing. What's it perceiving?
Suchness, right?
The Buddha's mind observing emptiness. What's it perceiving? What object of knowledge is it perceiving? Don? You said something, but it was so quick, then you muted again.
I think it's just perceiving suchness.
Yeah. So it's perceiving suchness. So the way in which all that is knowable within the sphere of ultimate truth is known, and two, the way in which all that is knowable within the sphere of conventional truth is known. Or as Jeffrey says, two ways that a Buddha's pristine wisdom knows objects of knowledge. A mode of knowing all objects of knowledge that are ultimate truths, that seems more clear, and a mode of knowing all objects of knowledge that are obscurational truths, or as Jim is translating, conventional realities. So we say samvriti satya. Samvriti can be translated as obscurational or conventional and so forth. Okay, so that's one thing. There are two ways. Of these, the first is the knowing of suchness. And here, he's got in italics a very important phrase, in a manner of not seeing the diverse appearance of conventional truths. He says conventional truth. Or as Jeffrey says, concerning those, the first is the knowledge of suchness of the aggregates and so forth, in the manner of not perceiving their conventional appearances. Jimpa says, in the manner of not seeing the diverse appearances of the conventional truth. Okay. As for the second, that's talking about the aspect of the Buddha's mind that's perceiving the variety of phenomena, conventionalities, by knowing the consciousness of sentient beings. As for the second, since indirect knowing, a kind of knowing, but not directly, by not directly perceiving it, cannot be posited in relation to a Buddha. What is that talking about? The Buddha is, you could say, indirect, or what's another word for indirect? Shukla, what is that?
Implicit.
Implicit. So the Buddha doesn't know things implicitly. He knows everything explicitly. He knows everything directly. So for the second sense, what was it? Implicit, indirect knowing but not directly perceiving it cannot be posited in relation to a Buddha. Conventional realities must be known by a Buddha on the basis of directly perceiving them. So within the perspective of a Buddha's gnosis, pristine wisdom, perceiving things in their diversity, the Buddha perceives conventional realities in a manner where the subject and its object do not appear as distinct. The Tibetan actually says nisu nangwa, which is do not appear as two or do not appear as duality. Jeffrey translates that as, it is not suitable to posit that a Buddha has implicit realization in which something is realized even though it does not appear. For instance, the lower tenets say we have an implicit realization of selflessness because what directly appears are the impermanent aggregates, and implicitly you know that the person is devoid of being permanent that way. So it's not like that. The Buddha sees everything directly. It is not suitable to posit that a Buddha has implicit realization in which something is realized even though it does not appear, and hence everything must be known upon its appearing. Okay, so Jimpa's phrase about where the subject and object do not appear as distinct, do not appear as dual, that is at the beginning of Jeffrey's sentence there.
But sorry, Venerable, but they do appear.
What does appear? What appears?
Subject and object. It is said in Jimpa's. They do appear.
Did I say that wrong?
I think you say do not.
Yes, I think so.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah. I'm sorry. It's just.
Okay, thank you.
What was it? Politicians say they misspoke. I misspoke, right? The Buddha perceives, reading Jimpa, the Buddha perceives conventional realities in a manner where the subject and its object do appear as distinct. That is, does see that duality. In Jeffrey's translation, that comes at the beginning of that sentence. The second is the knowledge of those aggregates and so forth in the perspective of the pristine wisdom, knowing the diversity of phenomena in the manner of dualistic appearance as object and subject. It says nisu nangwa, ni usually means two, so appearing as two or appearing dualistically, dualistic appearance. So that's coming at the beginning of Jeffrey's sentence, the way that he parses that paragraph. Whereas it comes at the very end of Jimpa's. So the Buddha's knowing sentient beings' minds through clairvoyance, through his omniscient mind, he sees how they perceive things in that dualistic way. There, the dualism is referring to the sense of a difference between a subject and object. Okay. How are we doing? KT, what do you think? Making sense? You're just going to leave it at that?
Oh, is it saying so? Is it saying the two ways of knowing of the Buddha are the Buddha can know non-duality of the perfect vision of ultimate truth, as well as the non-duality and duality of the conventional.
Okay, so the duality in those two cases are different. Okay. The meaning of duality. Remember, we were talking about, and many times, substantial existence has many, many different meanings in different contexts. Duality has different meanings in different contexts. So when you're talking about the Buddhist perception of reality, non-dual there, of course it means also there's no, at an earlier level, that means that there's no difference between the sense of a subject and object. The mind is completely immersed in that object. but non-duality in that case is a synonym of emptiness. The phenomena appear without the duality of appearing to be inherently existent. Whereas in the second case, the duality is talking about, for perceiving conventional phenomena, a difference between the subject and object. Richard, what do you think?
Well, that's exactly my question. I just don't understand the difference between the two kinds of dualities. Maybe you could explain it a little bit again.
Yeah. So, yeah. So, according to my understanding, so when we talk about perception of non-duality, let's say the perception of an Arya in meditative equipoise or of a Buddha, that's referring to the fact that phenomena do not appear as inherently existent. There's two kinds of appearances, one in which that appearance of inherent existence exists, and one in which that appearance of inherent existence does not exist. I think it's referring to that duality. So non-duality means that you're only perceiving emptiness without the appearance of inherent existence. Whereas in the second case, when it's talking about conventional realities, right now, when I look outside, I see snow on the branches, and I'm up high, so I can't see snow on the ground. I can see on my neighbor's roof, I can see snow. It appears that I, as the subject, is perceiving the snow, which is the object, as two separate things, as dual, as a duality. So the Buddha's mind that perceives conventionalities does have that sense of duality. Sean?
That I think I understand.
Okay, thank you. Sean, what do you think?
Does it not have anything to do with the fact that on the conventional level, ordinary people see conventional reality as truly existent, but to a Buddha, it's dependent or a dependent arising. So the truly existent aspect of conventional reality would never be seen because it doesn't exist. But that dependent side of conventional reality would be seen, would it not?
So the Buddha doesn't have any perception of true existence?
Not if they're maintained in meditative equipoise all the time. Then any conventional existence that they see would be dependently arisen and not inherent.
Yeah. So does the Buddha know the minds of sentient beings?
Well, sure.
Does the
I mean,
Buddha know
on
your
that
mind?
aspect, then they would see what the people are seeing as truly existent.
Yeah, so the Buddha does perceive in that aspect of the mind that perceives conventionalities, does perceive true existence, or does I'm going to say can't perceive true existence. Does perceive the appearance of true existence that appears to the minds of sentient beings. Because as you point out correctly, true existence and inherent existence don't exist at all. Nadine, are you falling asleep? I'm sorry. Is it late? What time is it there?
It's not so late, but I'm still used to the Asian time. That's why I'm quite tired.
Right.
But I try to follow.
Yeah. So Nadine has just come back from Sri Lanka, just had a day or two to jet lag. So she did this great pilgrimage, and amongst the vacation and have a chance to meet friends and so forth, she was able to visit the relic of the Buddha's hair in Colombo and the Buddha's tooth in Kandy, the capital. So that's why she's still tired. Okay. So before, I thought I saw Doris waving her arms. Did you want to say something earlier, Doris? No?
I'm just very stiff. trying to loosen up.
Okay, sort of like that, like the arhats who still have that, they haven't eliminated all the obstructions to omniscience, that they sort of do some kind of jumping or say, you're
I
a
thought she was having a conniption.
Sorry.
Okay.
Well,
So how we
because
do
it seems like the person who brought up the issue or the qualm or the question is thinking that if conventional realities don't truly exist, then they don't exist at all, which is a common mistake.
that's one part of it. Yeah, but so there are many different interpretations that scholars in the past had of what the Buddha's perception is. Some say that he doesn't have any wisdom at all. He doesn't have any gnosis at all. You know, some say that he doesn't perceive conventionalities. It was Nagarjuna's and Aryadeva's and Buddhapalita's and Chandrakirti's position that the Buddhas do perceive conventionalities, but not, there are two aspects of the omniscient mind. One that is focused on emptiness and one that is focused on the varieties of phenomena, which we could take to mean the conventional appearance of phenomena. And the Buddha knows those appearances through knowing the minds of sentient beings. So let me just read this next, a little bit of the next paragraph in preparation for our next class. So Jinpa's translation says, now it is not that a Buddha's knowledge of things in their diversity, conventional perception, perceives aggregates and so on because of the fact that it is affected by habitual propensities of ignorance. It's not appearing, for me, things appearing the diversity of phenomena are appearing because I am affected by the imprints, one part of the obstructions to omniscience. That's not the case with the Buddha. Nevertheless, a Buddha must perceive the appearances experienced by other beings whose cognitions are tainted by ignorance. Turn the phrase here. There is no denying that such appearances do exist. So the Tibetan there says that, I think it's something like Mepa mi rungwa. It's not suitable that it's not. Here he says, there's no denying that such appearances do exist. And if such conventional truths exist, they must be perceived by the Buddha's gnosis. Again, my grammar is not that well, but it looks like Jinpa's in this section hasn't been proofread enough. They must be perceived by the Buddha's gnosis pertaining to things in their diversity. Okay, so that's where we'll start next time. How are we doing? Anyone have any questions? Anna, how are you? I know you're always good. Yeah, I was gonna say you would be good in a picture with Trump. That's what he always. Isn't that what he always does? He always has.
Okay, so I'll take that back and I'll say, I'm going to read through this and like I have a reasonable understanding, but it is hard with all this terminology.
Yeah.
I would have to choose which one to stick to and be clear about it.
Right. Sometimes you have to alternate. Sometimes Hopkins' translation is a little clearer, and sometimes Jinpa's is a little clearer. Stephen, you okay?
What I'm wondering about, Venerable George, is so we're saying that a Buddha only knows conventional reality through the minds of others. Is that saying that therefore the Buddha has no direct perception of conventional realities through just through his own consciousness? And so nothing appears?
No, this is a little bit subtle there. So the Buddha does have a direct perception of those phenomena that sentient beings call conventional phenomena. Those are truths for a jerk, right? They're truths for an obscured mind. The Buddha's mind is not obscured at all. It's like the state of an Arya in meditative equipoise on emptiness. Phenomena do not appear. The inherent existence of phenomena do not appear. Even emptiness does not appear to be inherently existent. The direct realization of emptiness, as opposed to a conventional realization of emptiness, and let's say conceptual realization of emptiness. The emptiness is appearing. The mental image of emptiness is appearing to be inherently existent. But the Buddha does know those phenomena, all of the varieties of phenomena, directly through the minds of sentient beings. How about the distant parts of the galaxy where there is no starships? Star Trek hasn't gone there. There's no planets around, maybe nothing around. How does the Buddha know that if there's no sentient beings there whose minds are perceiving it, that he can have clairvoyance of?
His mind pervades all of it.
Yeah.
But doesn't he know it as an ultimate truth rather than as a conventional truth, since no ordinary being is perceiving it as a conventional truth?
So, yeah, something to think about. Like if a tree falls in the forest and there's no one there to hear it or see it, that kind of question. Okay, so we'll leave that for next class and for discussion on Monday. Any last qualms before we end? Is that a qualm question, Rachel? When you were going?
Oh, I'm willing to use it as a koan for the next week. That's fine.
Okay, excellent, good. Okay, so let's dedicate the virtues that we've created today, because we tried to set at the beginning the strong motivation. Due to these virtues, Gewadi, may I quickly become a Guru Buddha, and as a result lead all beings, all migrators, without exception, into that very state. Dei Sala. It doesn't say that in enlightened state, Dei Sala, into that state. May the supreme precious bodhicitta that has not arisen arise and grow, and may that which has arisen already not diminish, but increase more and more. And we can think of this, although this is a prayer in the praise of Maitreya, I think that here we can think of it as a dedication as a result of these merits. And then the prayer for the quick return of Lama Zopa Rinpoche's reincarnation. Peerless teacher and assembly of children of the conquerors, Shravakas, Pratika Buddhas, Conqueror Losang, Drakpa, Lama Tsongkhapa, spiritual father, with your spiritual sons of Kedrupche and Gyaltsupche, together with your lineage, all the objects of refuge of the infinite realms, please bestow the virtue. Please now bestow, here and now, bestow the virtue and goodness to accomplish this prayer. In upholding and spreading the Muni's precious and complete teachings through explanation and practice, you wore the armor of patience that is never discouraged. Incomparable Venerable Guru, Lama Zopa, to you I make this request. Sole gateway through which all benefit and happiness emerge, while striving exclusively for the welfare of the conqueror's teachings and mother living beings, you suddenly departed to peace. At this, I was bereft of hope. I lost hope. Nevertheless, through the undeceiving truths of the oceanic blessings of the three jewels, and the great waves of bodhicitta of the bodhisattvas, the mind generation of the children of the victorious ones, made the smile of a new reincarnation swiftly beam in glory for us fortunate disciples. Finally, to all of our gurus, the Yangtze Rinpoches, who is it this weekend that Yangtze Rinpoche is teaching, or next weekend at Shantideva? I remember seeing Dalai Lama's
next week.
I think it's next week.
Serkon Rinpoches and so forth. You who are my eyes for viewing all the infinite scriptures, supreme gateways for the fortunate ones traveling to liberation, engaging with skillful means, moved by mercy, illuminating spiritual friends, I make this request. Please live long and stable lives. Okay, thank you very much. So you could say that
there was a request in the chat from Mintu.
Yes. What did he say?
Can we also dedicate merit so that the ongoing fires in California can be quickly subdued?
Yes, very nice. Thank you. So right now, Californians are experiencing the fire element. Here in my cabin, about a month ago, we were experiencing the water and wind element when the hurricane came through. And so what's left? Fire, air, or earth element, earthquakes, and in Tibet. Yes, just in Tibet, just this last couple of days. It was in Shigatse, I guess, right? Where Paul and I visited in the bus together with Jeffrey Hopkins and Elizabeth Napper and Geshe Jamspel when the Pension Lama was there. So we're all familiar with those areas and have our hearts wrenched by all of those. So, when one has great tantric abilities, it's possible to control the elements to some degree. We're not in that position. So for us to dedicate our merits that these instability of the four elements, especially right now, besides all of the instability in the winds of the sentient beings' minds that are causing the divisiveness and craziness and so forth, due to these merits, may the calamities being experienced by sentient beings due to the imbalance of the four elements be quickly pacified. And may we reach a period again of stability so that people can live in relative comfort as much as possible in cyclic existence due to the merits that we have created. Okay, thanks for reminding us, Mintu. I'm sorry I had passed that by. How are you? Are you close to the fires there?
No, where I am, we don't have fire, but I just met a friend last week and he lives in LA, and then this week his house was burned down completely.
Oh, wow. Wow. So how far are you by driving to get to LA from you is what, about 2 hours maybe, or 3 hours?
5 hours.
5 hours.
Yeah.
You must drive very slowly. Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, this is the second instant where I seen something like this. Last year, 2 years ago, I was in Maui, and I saw the downtown Maui, and then like a month later, it was burned down completely. So I was pretty shocked by that too.
Oh, okay. So it's good to see everyone. Look forward to seeing some of you on, or I'd like to see all of you on discussion group on Monday, but probably not. That's probably too optimistic. But certainly, hopefully, to see you next Saturday. Think about the questions that we've left dangling, review the material, and have a good and safe week.
Thank you, Venerable.